I ain't
Suck
got
ass.
no motherfucker.
That's why I fucked your bitch, you fat motherfucker. West side, bad boy killers. You know who the realest is, niggas. We bring it to you. First off, fuck your bitch in the clique you claim. West side, when we ride, come equipped with game. You claim to be a player, but I fucked your...
Welcome everybody to Buck Life. This is the Hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fan podcast made by hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans for hardcore Milwaukee Bucks fans, and I think the theme of today is start panicking. With me today is my co-host Chuck Schilling. No guest today. Chuck, how are you tonight?
Not too bad. 1 week ago from today we recorded our last episode, and we kind of mentioned that this might be a very telling week, and I don't think any of us are feeling better about where the team sits in terms of winning. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm feeling worse overall, but in terms of winning this season, not looking good as of today.
Well, I was going to say, I said start panicking, or, if you're in favor of a longer rebuild, I guess you could say start celebrating, because the way things are going right now, it looks like it is going to be more of a rebuilding process than we thought. As we're recording this, the Bucks just had lost to Charlotte today in the afternoon game, but we're going to go over kind of what's happened with the Bucks in the last week. We'll start, since the last time we recorded, the Bucks played Detroit, and I believe that was Monday, and it was a 21-point victory for the Bucks.
Best game of the season. We got a complete game from a lot of players. That was, the one bright spot this week has been Middleton has looked a little better than he had, and we paid him a lot of money for a few more years, so that, him looking good is good no matter how we feel about a rebuild. So, that was the first complete game. MCW had that game that he has every 5 games where he looks like he belongs on an NBA floor. Good games from Monroe. He was kind of abusing, what's his name?
Andre Drummond.
I was drawing a blank there for a second. Yeah, he kind of really abused Andre Drummond. Made him look like a fool at times. Who's a very good player. MCW looked good. Jabari, Giannis, it was a good team effort on Monday.
Yeah, it was a game where you had a lot of guys facing their former team. As you said, Greg Monroe put up 20 points and 13 rebounds against Andre Drummond, who I guess you could say is who the Pistons kind of handpicked to replace him at center. I know they tried to play him together at power forward center and just didn't work out, but I think he definitely got the better of the matchup, although in the first half, Drummond really came to play. Second half, he didn't really show much. Ersan Ilyasova, former Milwaukee Buck legend, who I felt like was going to play for them forever, but he didn't really show us much to make him miss him. He was 0 for 7 in that game.
Yeah, no points either. He didn't get any free throws. He's basically a non-factor.
Jabari Parker, 12 points. Giannis Antetokounmpo, 17 points. On, again, low field goal attempts for those two. Especially with Giannis, it seems to be a theme where there's going to be a lot of nights where he leads the team in scoring despite not really getting many field goal attempts. But really looked like the team had turned the tide to me at this point. Not just the fact that they won, but how much they won by. And just, the eye test
effort,
you watched them,
yeah.
you saw they looked like they were having fun again. And it looked more like last year's Bucks.
Yeah, that was exactly what I thought. I thought maybe it'd be springboard to something better. Maybe it was a sign of things to come. Particularly with Middleton, like I said, it was kind of the first game this season that he really put it all together and was efficient and not bad. He hasn't been terrible. I don't want to call him garbage or anything, but this was the first game where he looked like the player we expected when we gave him the 5-year contract. And it just hasn't come to fruition because since then we've lost 3 more games.
Well, it's kind of strange because Middleton this year, he's actually improved on what a lot of people thought his best strength was his 3-point shooting. But I think where the inefficiency comes from is he's doing a lot of one-on-one play, a lot of post-ups, and I don't know if it's necessarily his game. He can be an effective post-up player if he gets the mismatch that he wants, but watching him, it seems like he prefers to, like I said, take people either off the dribble or post them up, and it's just, in this day and age, not the kind of style of basketball you want to see, especially from somebody that you probably paid to be the guy to stretch the floor and be your 3-point specialist.
Yeah, what I want out of Middleton has always been D and 3. I want him to defend the other shooting guard. I want him to hit that spot up 3, which he still does those 2 things. And I don't know if it's coaching or if it's him, but it has seemed right from the start of the season he's kind of trying to force it with the post-up moves, with the drives, and trying to beat his opponent off the dribble. And that's not his strength in his game. Not that he can't do it at times, especially when he gets the defensive mismatch, coming off a switch or whatever. But that's not his strength. And it seemed to me that someone, again, I don't know if it's coaches or him, they're just trying to force this. And he's not had a good 2-point shooting percentage, even though he's shooting well from the three. And that's why, despite his struggles early in the season, I've never felt like he's hurting the team out there. He's still contributing and probably a net positive, but he's not helping them as much as he should be given his skill set.
Yeah, a lot of his inefficiency this year, I wonder if some of it has to do with the way he goes about his game and the pressure of having that money that he was given in the offseason. Like, I wonder if he feels, because he's, to my knowledge, him and Monroe are the two highest paid players on the team, if he feels that makes him the guy of the team, or, the go-to player. I certainly hope that's not the case, because I think everybody, whether it be fans, the coaches, just in the front office, hope long-term that he can be a piece of the puzzle, but not the guy. I think if you're counting on him to be your number one go-to scoring option, you're probably not going to end up with very good results.
Yeah, I definitely think he probably feels some pressure to be at least more of the man than he has been in the past. And I would imagine, and I don't know what discussions have been happening with the front office, general manager, and coaches. I would hope that when they've signed him to this contract and in practices and all that, they've told him that they just want him to be, the player who he has been. They're not expecting something more out of him. They just want him to continue to be who he was. But I've been to 2 games this season so far. I was at the first Jabari game, and before the game, anyone who goes to a game knows that they used to play the Money, Money, Money song, after Middleton would make a three-pointer, and the fans section, Cream City Clash, I was trying to remember what they're called. They would hold up dollar signs, in favor of Chris Middleton. And prior to that game, apparently he made the decision that he no longer wanted that.
Interesting. I had not heard that.
Yeah, and this was, I was sitting right in front of him that game, not in the section, but I was near them, so I kind of heard through the grapevine, or however you want to say, that this literally came down right before game, and they quickly collected all the dollar signs and all this, and we didn't hear that.
He personally said that?
He personally did it. The thought process, and at the time, this was when he was really struggling. He wasn't even hitting his threes. That was only, a couple games into the season, and he had been struggling. And, my thought process was, but he probably got a little pressure on him. I hope the coaching staff and the management is out there telling him, we want you to be the guy you were in past years. Play your defense, shoot your threes, because it certainly feels like things are being forced. And I don't personally enjoy watching that.
No, it's been a struggle. Continuing the theme of struggling, the next game they played Sacramento at home just before Thanksgiving. This was a game where they were in it for the most game, but just faded late. The big standout to me was you had bad defense, 129 points given up to Sacramento, who's by no means an offensive juggernaut. And to compound the bad defense there, you're not even had to deal with DeMarcus Cousins that game, as Boogie was out for... I can't remember what injury it was, but
I think he left the previous back strain or something like that. I don't even know if he's back yet, if it's serious or if it was just a game or two injury. I can't say I follow Sacramento all that closely, but I do remember, because we were playing them next, seeing on Twitter something about a back strain of some sorts, that he left the previous game early.
Well, and even though he didn't play, he did make his impact felt on the court and off the court. We'll get into that in just a minute here, but a couple highlights of that. Rudy Gay just absolutely destroyed us. I mean, he dropped 36 on us. Rajon Rondo, I think he was 1 rebound away from a triple-double. Giannis and Middleton both had 21 points, but Michael Carter-Williams, 0 of 7. In maybe his worst game as a Milwaukee Buck.
You're right on Rondo. He was 1 rebound short of a triple-double. He had 13 assists, 9 boards, and 10 points.
Well, and it didn't feel good because I know a lot of people don't exactly like Rajon Rondo as a person or like his game, but I've always enjoyed watching him play because he's an old school throwback to kind of a true point guard, and he's got a little bit of flash to his game. So seeing the contrast of Rajon Rondo playing point guard and Michael Carter-Williams playing point guard, and it was a night and day difference, and it kind of made me a little bit envious. Then at the end of the game, you had Jason Kidd getting ejected with, I believe, about a minute left. At that point, the game was out of reach and knocked the ball out of the official's hand, and then did the whole bullshit like, "Oh, I'm tough guy, hold me back. I want to go fight this guy." To me, I know he got a lot of cheers on his way out, but I thought it was a classless move. I thought it didn't really do much for the team. Maybe if this was a preconceived thing for him that he wanted to get the team fired up, maybe you do it midway through the fourth or something, or at some point when the game is still up for grabs. At that point, it was over, and it just, to me, looked like a kid or being a sore loser and taking his ball and going home.
And I had the same feeling. It brought back memories of the time when he had the Pepsi that got spilled on the court or whatever.
Right.
Hit me and spilled the Pepsi. And I don't know. Maybe that's he just thinks he can get away with these things, or maybe heat of the moment. We've all. I shouldn't say we all. I don't know what our listeners' backgrounds are, but I've played, just pick up ball with friends, and the testosterone gets going. You do stupid things, you say stupid things, you call your best friends a lot of nasty words, and then when you're done playing, you're friends again, and you're calmed down and whatever. So, maybe it's just a heat of the moment thing. I don't know if it was premeditated. The soda thing seemed pretty meditated. This may be a little less. He's arguing with the ref and just swatted the ball away. Definitely comes off as childish and something, he served a game suspension. The league's got to send that message.
Well, I thought maybe he just wanted an extra day to party down in Florida.
Yeah, maybe he wanted to go all the way to South Beach. He didn't want to go to Orlando, or he wanted to go to Disney, Universal, whatever, instead of going to the game. But certainly you can't have a coach doing that. You can't have a player doing that. No one should be doing that. The refs are at times bad. I'm not one to ever defend the NBA refs, but they're out there doing their job too, and you can't do that. That should be an ejection and a suspension every time. And
he's the other than your marketable players, he's the face of your franchise, and it does set a bad tone from the top on down. That I remember in the NFL when the Detroit Lions had Jim Schwartz as their head coach, and I just thought, this is a team that's never going to win anything because they have a knucklehead like him. Condoning stupid plays and dirty plays.
You had players stomping on other players and kicking them and whatever, and it was definitely a pattern. And I don't want to see that from the Bucks because I want to have players I can root for.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with fire, but even in the post game presser when they asked Jason Kidd about the incident that we're going to get into in a minute here, involving O.J. Mayo and DeMarcus Cousins, and I think Bayless was involved. He had like a smarky remark, like, "I didn't hear anything about it because I was drinking a Coke and eating popcorn." Like to really just say, "I don't really give a fuck." That it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. As I said after the game, or I believe as the final seconds were winding down, O.J. Mayo and DeMarcus Cousins were jawing at each other, and as the buzzer sounded, O.J. Mayo was seen running off the court and kind of gesturing to DeMarcus Cousins, like, "Come on, let's go, meet me in the tunnel." And I just remember being on Twitter and like constantly swiping to get updates, like trying to see what the hell was going on, because all I heard was police were involved, and players were accompanying O.J. Mayo to his car to make sure he was safe, and it turns out to be just two idiots, being idiots. But it was kind of funny for a few minutes there. I'm going, oh my god, this shit's going down right now.
Right, you're thinking of some Gilbert Arenas, Crittenden stuff, bring the guns to play or whatever. You don't know. You don't know, and I agree. When I heard Jason Kidd's response to the questions at the press conference, it just came off as snarky and
arrogant.
Arrogant is a very good word, and it didn't sit right with me. The reporters have a duty to ask about those questions and to just kind of blow it off when it is a real thing. And unfortunately now I'm sure neither team really wants this to be a thing. So both teams will sweep it under the rug and we'll never hear anything of it again. And the reporters will have no reason to bring it up because they'll be talking about another loss after game after game after game. But yeah, it didn't sit well with me either when I saw it. I didn't watch the press conference live, but I saw the clip later on, and it just it rubbed me the wrong way.
Well, and I gotta say, O.J. Mayo is pretty ballsy if you're gonna go after a crazy dude like DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, that guy's got a few screws loose. Not somebody I would want to get in a fight with. Besides the fact that he's 6'11" and about 280 pounds.
Yeah.
And O.J.'s 6'5" and probably 200. Well, this year he's 200. A couple years ago he was like 300.
And like you said, I like playing with fire. If something's going on in the game, he knocks down your teammate hard, and you want to come to your teammate's defense, that's fine. But why are we doing this stuff after the game? The game is over. Let bygones be bygones. Be the bigger man, take the higher route.
Well, right.
Whatever cliche you want to use. There's just no need for it after the game is over.
Exactly. The timing was the biggest thing with this, because it's not like the game was still going on and you're trying to set an example for your teammates or say I'm not going to back down, something like that. But this is clearly just personal bullshit that there's no place for. And back to Jason Kidd, the whole little snarky jokes that he makes about I'm eating popcorn and drinking a Coke, haha, very funny. But to me, that's the last kind of response you want to see from the coach, because he could have easily gone one of two ways with being asked about the knocking the ball out of the ref's hands. He could have done the BS canned answer and say, "Oh, I lost my cool. I shouldn't have done that." Blah blah blah. Or he could have taken that moment to say, we were upset about this and really explain himself. And he did neither, which is, I think was just a bad route to go. And to me, it screams, I don't give a fuck. And if you don't give a fuck, why should the team that you're coaching, why should they care?
Yeah, and we'll get to that later because we've still got a couple games in. Well, we've got Orlando in between this, but tonight, talking of not giving a damn, it certainly
you can
felt
say the
tonight,
F word, Chuck. That's okay.
Yeah, I know.
He's deeply religious. This one.
Oh, you're right. Tonight it felt the game earlier today, and we're talking the afternoon game against Charlotte. It certainly felt that the players maybe didn't care all that much, and we'll get to talking about that, but. We could be ending up, and maybe we're reading too much into this. We're only 17 games into the season, but this might be a team that's going to lose its way. I don't know, but I agree. I don't like the idea that Jason Kidd, either he doesn't care or he's being honest and he didn't know, and if he didn't know, it's his job to know. If he's being completely honest, I was eating a snack and drinking a Coke or Pepsi, whatever he said. That's just as bad to me because he's got to have his finger on the pulse of this team.
Well, and going in now, we're talking next game. We go into Orlando. If Jason Kidd's goal was to get some sort of spark out of his team, then he went about it all wrong because the Bucks end up losing to Orlando by 24. The biggest story in this game was the third quarter, in which the Bucks were outscored by 15 points. Looking at some of the numbers here, Greg Monroe, just another not very good game, 3 of 12 shooting, and looked frustrated all night. Giannis, again, 17 points on 10 shots. We need to get him more shot attempts. MCW just absolutely got his ass handed to him by Elfrid Payton, who went for 22 points, 10 assists. And our old friend Tobias Harris reminding us about the great J.J. Redick trade, scoring 19 on us. And Victor Oladipo, who was recently moved to the bench to a lot of controversy, which he wasn't happy about it, obviously, but ended up doing well, scored 17 points, 9 assists, 6 rebounds. Or, 9 assists, 6 rebounds, so he had a big game. But this was a game that never felt like it could have been a win to me, almost out of the gate. The energy wasn't there. I don't know, maybe they ate too much turkey, too much mashed potatoes, but it didn't go well, and again, the tone that Jason Kidd set was not a good one. Right.
This was a very, very forgettable game. I was following on my phone because I had family in town for the holidays, like a lot of people was. So I was out to dinner with my sister, who we didn't get together with my family for Thanksgiving. It was all the other families. So I wasn't watching the game live.
Was the Blonsk there?
No, the Blonsk was not there. So yeah, we were. I was following the game on my phone, and when I first checked on the game, because we went out for hibachi, a favorite of mine.
Hibachi is like crack to this guy, but go on.
Hibachi is delicious. So we went out, and I opened up my phone when we first got our table and sat down, and it was a 2-point game. Bucks were down by 2, and I thought, okay, exciting game. I figure Orlando and Milwaukee are probably of similar, the way they're playing, their record-wise, they're similar. So you thought maybe it'd be a good game going into it. And then the next thing I know, they just way fell behind. It was halftime shortly after, and then by the time I checked on the score in the third quarter, it was out of hand. And this has been a pattern. We've talked about it before, and even today against Charlotte, the Bucks started strong. They built an early lead, and then things got out of control. I think in Charlotte they were up 28-22 after the first quarter, and then to open the quarter, Charlotte went on a 14-0 run, I believe, at the start of the second quarter. And eventually in the third quarter, the Bucks did fight back and tie it a couple times, but it never really felt to me like they had the energy or the ability to actually win that game today, even though it was close right down to the final minute.
Yeah, the strangest thing about today's game, which was against Charlotte, as you said, was that they did have that third quarter and fourth quarter comeback, but even though you're coming back on the score, you look at the body language of these guys. I didn't see any passion. I didn't see the fire that you would normally see. It almost felt like they came back by default, which it's easy to say that. It's got to be hard to do, but I just didn't see it today. The big takeaway for me from today's game was Giannis, who only took 5 field goal attempts. That wasn't because he was being frozen out of the offense and he just wasn't getting the ball passed to him. He probably wasn't as much as I would like, but there was a ton of opportunities for him to not only shoot some open jump shots, but also maybe try to take a guy off the dribble, which is clearly his game at this point. And he almost looked intentional to me that he was not going to do that. And again, 4 or 5 shooting. The defense was great, but this was I have on my notes here that Giannis looked sad. Which that's not good. I like happy Giannis. Normally he's the happy-go-lucky guy that
There's 2 Giannis's I like. The happy Giannis, which we get a lot of. He seems, and having never met him, you don't want to read too much into it, but he always seems like he's a really happy guy. Just kind of enjoys playing basketball, enjoys life in general.
I think he's appreciative of everything he has.
And then the second Giannis is angry Giannis, and I like angry Giannis too. You get.
I think I like that more.
Yeah, I do too. I like angry Giannis. There's times where he gets fired up, and you kind of see the angry face come out, and so yeah, those are the 2 Giannis's that I like to see. And today he just seemed disinterested, and I don't like to read too much into things, but it didn't look right watching it, and he passed up several what looked like easy scoring opportunities. There's no saying that he would have made those opportunities, but you got to take them. You never make a shot you don't take. And not that I want him just jacking up shots, but if it's an open shot, he's got to take it.
Well, and it's so key for his development is to get those reps, and it's something we always talk about on this podcast, and I think a lot of the hardcore fans just want to see Giannis and Jabari shooting more and just making the most of their opportunities. But, again, I mentioned before he played great defense. There was a block that he had late where it was down low, and I think the Bucks were down 2 at that point, or I know it was a 1-possession game, and he made this tremendous block shot, and he had no reaction, wasn't cheering, wasn't like, let's go and anything like that. Just kind of like, whatever.
It was almost, if you get that block in a blowout, win or loss, either way, I get it. But you're right. We were talking a 1-possession game with under 2 minutes to go. I remember the play. I don't remember exactly the time or if we were tied or, down 2 or 3, whatever it was. But the last couple minutes of the game were all pretty tight in terms of the score. One problem I had is towards the end of the game, we had Jared Bayless, who clearly was tired and his shots were all short. He was just jacking
everything
threes.
Came off the front of the rim for him.
And he's had a fantastic season. He's shooting the 3 very well. In most situations, I have no problem with, and some of them were more open than other. And if you get an open shot in the course of passing the ball or whatever, take it. But he was clearly tired from playing a lot of minutes. And when the shot's not falling, the shot's just not falling. I felt like we kind of forced it in there too much.
And, sometimes when you force it in, it ends up bad for you.
Yeah, well, you're the one with 2 kids, so, hey,
Valid point. You mentioned him playing a lot of minutes. I can't believe we didn't even bring it up, and I didn't write it in my notes, but it's the big obvious thing was that after the Orlando debacle, Jason Kidd came out and made a lineup change. Michael Carter-Williams to the bench, Jabari Parker to the bench. I guess Michael Carter-Williams to the bench was a good move. He needs to know that this isn't, the starting point guard spot isn't his by default. He's got to work for it. He's got to earn it. And Bayless is, he kind of was rewarded for his pretty good play so far this year. Jabari to the bench, I don't really have a problem with it. I mean, I don't necessarily think it was necessary, but if you look at the roster construction of the team, I think him and Giannis can play very similar type of games, and they're both kind of 3-4 swing players, so it's not the worst thing in the world to have them coming off the bench. But there was one very telling thing about the new lineup was that tonight Jabari and Giannis did not play a single minute on the floor together, and that was very, very strange to me.
Yeah, it was strange because no matter how you feel they fit side by side, they are they're the future, the two of them. That's what they should be. So you want to think that they're going to get some way to work together. Whatever that is. And you're right that they're both kind of playing a similar game. Neither one has really developed a long range shot, so they're both kind of trying to slash and take it to the hoop and all that. But you can certainly fit both of them in there. And we'll see if this is a permanent change going forward or if it's just a one-game experiment. Certainly, I think it was a good message to send to Michael Carter-Williams, that the starting spot is not his by default. And I also think it's a good message to send to Bayless because he has had a really good season. He's been one of the bright, surprising spots of the season. And he's a veteran. He's not a long-term piece, but there's nothing wrong with commending a guy who's playing well and within his game. I think it's a good message to send to Michael Carter-Williams. I don't know what message was supposed to be sent to Jabari. I don't know if they're just trying to shake things up or if he didn't practice hard. I don't know. I don't like
simple as they like Middleton at the 3 more.
There's a lot of reasons why it could be, and I don't personally like to speculate too much without actually talking to someone about why they did it. From the outside looking in, I would guess Michael Carter-Williams, it's because he's not playing that well. And Jabari, for coming off the injury, I think everyone's okay with how he's been playing for the most part. He is coming off of a major injury, so I'm not going to be too down on how he's playing now. So I don't feel that there's any message needing to be said to him, but again, I'm not in practice, so who knows? I think it may be just mixing up the lineup thing with Jabari and hopefully trying to get Michael Carter-Williams to get his head out of his ass.
Well, if that was the hope that you want to fire the guy up and, it didn't work. I mean, he played pretty atrociously today, and he just didn't have any confidence. He looked like a broken person out there. I heard a quote from him after the game saying that, well, the way I was playing, I would not start myself too. So he's pretty down on himself right now. At this point, the trade that we made to acquire Michael Carter-Williams in exchange for Brandon Knight looks like a disaster. To me, not because we gave up Brandon Knight, who I never liked as a fit as a point guard on this team, but the fact that we could have gotten what looks to be very high draft pick from the Suns, who own the Lakers' first-round pick this year. If that is pick 4 or worse, 4 or later, that pick will be conveyed to Philadelphia this year. So that could go down as an all-time blunder. Another takeaway from the lineup changes is that Grievous Vasquez, to my knowledge, was inactive. I don't know if he was a healthy scratch, but Tyler Ennis was given his minutes, or at least given some minutes. So that could be something to look for going forward. But a lot of ways, this game was or you could say almost a microcosm of the Bucks season. For Charlotte, they were taking a lot of threes, and at one point were hitting a lot of threes. They got red hot. They cooled down a little bit, but our defense has given up a lot of three-pointers this season. I can't really say much. I mean, they held them to 87 points on most days. You're going to win a game if you hold a team to 87 points. But the other big trend that I'm noticing is that our young players, our 2 star young players, just are not getting enough on offense. Maybe in Jabari's case, they want him to play better defense, but with Giannis, it doesn't make sense to me. He needs to be a guy that you're calling plays for. And a friend of the show, Chad Steger, posted something on Real GM and how it makes him sick to see a team like Minnesota just force-feeding the ball to Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns, and we're treating our young players as garbage men. Stand under the hoop, try to get a rebound, maybe get a putback. It reminds me of the lack of ability in developing Andrew Bogut when we drafted him number 1 overall. Normally, those guys that are picked high, you bring them in, you say this is going to be your team, you force feed them. With Bogut, it was the opposite. He was moved from center to power forward, and by Terry Stotts basically told, as I said earlier, just stand under the basket, you're going to be a garbage man type player. That's not a way to develop young players, and it's starting to piss me off, I'm going to be quite frank, because Giannis is consistently either our leading scorer or second leading scorer on very, very low shot attempts. His true shooting percentage is out of this world. I believe it's in the 60s now. So there's no excuse to not be getting him more touches, because he's not only doing the most with a small amount of shot attempts, but he's going to be the guy that you're going to be leaning on in the future. So why not get that going now, especially with the way the team's been playing?
Yeah, his true shooting percentage is at 61.2%, which is obviously very good. I don't know where that ranks in terms of the league, but it's certainly above average and a very good player. He's having a very good season, and you're right. He's not. I don't know that we've ever really run a play from him. Every now and then out of a timeout or something, you'll see somehow they get the ball to win a backdoor pass, and he gets an easy layup or a dunk or whatever. But in terms of getting our half-court offense, I don't know that I've ever seen any play. And again, I don't know what they're calling, so I don't like to ever speculate too much. But
well, it's fine to not speculate, but whether it's
we want to see him more involved.
Yes, exactly. Whether it's the players on the court, the coaching, do what you need to do. This kid is obviously a stud, and it seems like everybody recognizes it except for the fucking team itself.
Right. And that's. Both of us have wanted him more involved since his rookie season. And his rookie season, we had Larry Drew as a coach, and Larry Drew's a clown as a coach. Nothing, he might be a nice guy. I don't know. I've never met him, but as a coach,
don't say that to Gary Wolfel. He'll lose it on you.
Yeah, whatever. So I never liked Larry Drew as a coach. Last year we saw Giannis get involved a little more, but still not enough, and this year he's involved a little more, but again, it just feels like he gets what's there because of his skills, not because we're catering the team to him, and he should be the best player on the team, and he should be what we're focusing on running the offense through, and putting the ball in his hands. There was some experimenting with him last year, playing kind of a point forward type position, similar to what LeBron does, and what we'll see Ben Simmons do, which I'm sure we'll talk Ben Simmons a little later in the podcast. I wouldn't mind seeing some of that again. Have Giannis bring the ball up the court, let him initiate the offense, especially with Michael Carter-Williams going to the bench. Bayless, his point guard skills aren't why he's having a good season so far this year. He's having a good season because he's hitting the open three-pointers. With the starting lineup we had tonight, I wouldn't mind having the primary facilitators on offense have been Giannis and Mayo, even, because Mayo's a pretty good passer. And let the Middleton hit the open threes, Bayless hit the open threes. You get someone Giannis double teamed and kick it down to Greg Monroe or whatever. Certainly want whatever it takes to get Giannis more involved in the offense. He's certainly earned it the way he's playing this year. He's very efficient. He's scoring well. He's playing good defense, and I don't really have much more to add to what you said on that topic.
Well, we said the 5 field goal attempts and how, to me, it almost looked intentional. If it really was intentional by Giannis, that I'm only the low field goal attempts, and perhaps his body language said that, I think that's really a cool thing. And maybe he's telling these guys, look, I'm the best player on the team, but you're not treating me like it. So, if you want me to do everything else, okay, but let's see how it works out for us. I hope that's the case, because he is the best player on the team, and he needs to be or start to be treated like such.
We'll get to see, if there's any changes. Does the lineup stay the same tomorrow? I was just reading up on it. Grievous Vasquez has a sore ankle of some sort, so our hopes of him permanently riding the bench are probably not going to happen, but maybe his ankle, maybe they need to amputate it, and he's done. I don't know. But yeah, so tomorrow night the Bucks will be right back at it, and I'm very interested to see what the starting lineup's going to be and what the rotations are going to be like tomorrow. Is this a one-game experiment and a temporary change, or is this a sign of things to come?
Well, if you ask me, and this is all opinion-based, when I look at this team, it reminds me of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. There's just so many new pieces that were brought in, and on paper, the talent level of this team versus last year's team is way, way higher. But last year's team, I feel like everybody knew their role, and you had enough guys that just had the veteran savvy that were just smart players. We jettisoned a lot of those guys in hopes of bringing in more talented players to get 45, 50 wins, whatever the case may be. And I don't foresee it getting much better. Maybe I'm wrong, and everybody tells me, "Oh, you're crazy. It's way, way too early to be saying that." But when I said in the last podcast, when is it not going to be too early? When can I actually start judging this team for what it is?
Yeah, and I think it was someone on Real GM or someone I was talking to. I can't take original credit for this idea or this exact phrasing, but someone said it, and that basically this year our parts are greater than the sum, whereas last year the sum was greater than the parts. Meaning, our individual parts last year were just not all that great, but they worked well together. And this year they're just not fitting together. Going into the season, I kind of took a wait-and-see approach on Michael Carter-Williams. I said, hey, let's get him a full off-season with the Bucks, get him a full training camp with Jason Kidd, because he came in the middle of the season. That's hard to do. And it's just more of the same. If anything, he looks worse. And like you said earlier, he's down on himself right now. He knows it. And hopefully the confidence, if that could snowball and he never gets his confidence back again, who knows what happens with Michael Carter-Williams. And then with Greg Monroe, we kind of all had the worry that he wouldn't be the best fit with the team. And, I kind of tried to convince myself that he would be, but it doesn't, offensively, certainly he's been fine. He's shooting well.
I guess you could say that's arguable too, just because he's a higher usage player than who our last center was, which was Zaza.
Yeah, that is true, and there are plenty of times where I see we're feeding him the ball in the post, and the ball never comes out. That's a problem not just with Monroe this year, but there's so many times where either we're feeding a guy in the post and that shot is going up, the pass is never coming back out. Or they get a rebound and it's going right back up. There's nothing wrong, and I don't know. If there's even a stat that tracks this, but it feels like we almost never kick the ball back out. Once it's down there in the post and the guy's going up with a shot, it's going up. And then if we manage to get an offensive rebound, those rare times we do, it's going right back up. No matter if they're surrounded by three guys, they're forcing it back up rather than kicking it out to a wide open. And I know sometimes making those passes is easier said than done, but it seems to be a problem to me. And sometimes I do feel like we are forcing it into Greg Monroe. Which is probably taking touches away from Giannis.
One of the things we want to do with this podcast a little bit more going forward is looking more into advanced stats, and this is, again, going to be maybe a little bit sobering to hardcore Bucks fans out there, but just a few of the ones that I kind of cherry-picked to kind of, in my opinion, show where we are as a team. First off, our rebounding. Rebounds per game and rebound percentage, we are dead last in the NBA. Turnovers per game, we're 21st in the league. Our turnover ratio is 25th. We are fouling more than any team in the NBA. Our plus-minus, we're 27th in the NBA. Defensive rating, total defense, we're dead last in the NBA. Still, we moved up a little bit in pacing. We went from dead last to second to last in overall pace. 27th in points off turnovers, 29th in second chance points. Opponents' field goal percentage, we're 25th in the league. Opponents' 3 points percentage, we're 26th in the league. We're giving up, I said earlier, we're fouling more than any other team. Also, our opponents' free throw attempts were 26th, and opponents' 3-point attempts, we are dead last at 30th. Our Pythagorean record says from basketballreference.com that we should be 4-12, which would make us third worst in the NBA. And Chuck found these stats. The did 7,500 different scenarios or simulated the season.
So I'll go over this one because I read. They simulated. Basketball Reference does this, and they update it periodically throughout the season. So it's the first time they had enough data to simulate it. So they run 7,500 simulations of the rest of the games, and this is based on current stats, how players are performing. And so of those 7,500 simulations, the Milwaukee Bucks didn't make the playoffs once, which is pretty damning. The only other teams that never made the playoffs in the 7,500 scenarios are obviously the Philadelphia 76ers, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Los Angeles Lakers.
And that's really saying something given the status of the Eastern Conference as a whole.
Yeah, of those, the best record they simulated us at was 40 wins and 42 losses. Average was 26.5 wins, 55.5 losses. And the worst case that they came up with was 14 wins and 68 losses, which puts us back just worse than 2 years ago. And then in terms of what those simulations then translate out into draft picks, it averaged out to us being the third worst record behind only Philadelphia and the Lakers. The good thing being if the Lakers finish with the second worst record, which is a very possibility, we don't have to worry too much about that draft pick. And that makes it, we don't want to be kicked in the face, twice there. But, with these numbers, when you look at them, we kind of tongue-in-cheek last week said maybe it'll be time to get on the tank if we have a bad week. Well, we had a bad week. The stats didn't improve. The advanced stats say we're worse than our record even says we are. And maybe getting a top 5 pick isn't all that out of the question. And, there's a couple nice players at the top of the draft, and we'll I'm sure as we go through the season, especially if this losing trend continues, I wouldn't be surprised if we start talking more and more about prospects and less about what's happening on the courts.
Well, I think we're at a potential breaking point as far as the season goes. And I know the Bucks have hired analytics people to, look at a lot of the same numbers that we kind of went off. And I said about this new ownership group, it's going to be telling to me if they would actually put their money where their mouth is, and if the team's not doing well, maybe make moves that aren't going to be so great for the present, but are going to be better for the future. They've sat here, they've sold us this hashtag own the future for 2 years now, it seems, or almost 2 years. Prove it. I don't think this is a very good team, and I don't think it's a talent issue. I think it's a fit issue. So if that means you have to jettison maybe a Greg Monroe, if you don't think Henson is worth the money that you gave him, if somebody else will take him, maybe you jettison him. You got to get rid of expiring contracts like Bayless, who's having the season of his life. OJ Mayo, who still probably has some decent value. It reminds me of the 2004-2005 Bucks, I believe, where going into the trade deadline, so even further down the line, the Bucks were very much in the hunt for a playoff seed. They were playing out of their minds, and they traded. It was Mike James, who was playing very good basketball at point guard for us, and a couple other guys, and they tanked away the rest of the season. At that point, they were very much in the thick of things, and God bless you, Larry Harris, because you were able to convince Herb Cole to tank. I really, really hope that if the analytics guys are conveying these messages to the front office people that, okay, this just isn't going to work, tank early if you need to. And when I say tank, I really hate the connotation that goes along with it, because people think tank would mean like, well, we're just going to purposely miss shots or purposely throw games. No, what I'm saying is get rid of a Greg Monroe. I'm glad we were able to sign him. That's great, but he clearly isn't a fit here. Maybe get him somewhere where he's a better fit and get some young assets back. Get rid of the older players like we mentioned, the Bayless, the Vasquez, whether that means trading or benching, whatever. Put the ball in the young players' hands, the guys that are going to be here long term, and let the chips fall where they may. If that means even more losses, oh well. If that means more wins, oh well. Those guys are getting experience. But I know I'm probably going to get a lot of heat because it is early, but I am all about let's end this experiment now and just move on.
Yeah, and I'm not quite there yet. That said, come trade deadline, for sure, if we're continuing to play like this, we need to be sellers. And in my mind, the only untouchables on this team are Jabari and Giannis. Maybe Vaughn. I don't know what they're seeing in practice if he's there. that's probably the only two untouchables. I'd say Middleton might be near there because he does have value as a defender and a three-point shooter. But in terms of the rest of the players, if we're still playing like this come closer to the trade deadline, by all means, we better be sellers. And we saw it last year. We did see a little bit last year where they were still very much in the playoff race, and they weren't afraid to trade. Why am I drawing a blank here? Brandon Knight. I don't know. I'm having trouble. It's been a long weekend. That 4-day weekend, even though I did work on Friday. So yeah, they weren't afraid to trade Brandon Knight despite being in the playoff race, despite him, in terms of your casual fan, he would look like the best player on the team because statistically, he was putting up the points.
PPGs.
And he was putting up the points. He was hitting the 3-point shots and the game winners and all that. So from a fan standpoint, he was probably the biggest name that people knew, and they weren't afraid to move on from him. So I would certainly hope that they wouldn't be afraid to do the same this year, but I guess we'll see. And, you were talking about people might get on you for being, it's too early, they're going to figure it out or whatever. But we're 17 games into the season as we're recording this. That's more or less a fourth of the season. Not quite. We got to play 3 more games. So by the time we record another episode, we'll be at the quarter point of the season. And I get that it takes time to, build a new team. When LeBron and Chris Bosh went down to Miami, they struggled out of the gate. They didn't, ESPN was doing that ridiculous thing right from the start of the season, monitoring their record versus the Bulls when they went 72-10. That was asinine and just proves what a joke ESPN is.
Yeah, it's the most ESPN thing they could do.
That is true. That almost makes them their self-parody at that point in time. But yes, it took time for them to kind of mesh together, but a quarter of the season is plenty of time. And if anything, things are looking worse because now we're, you could make the argument, okay, we played Cleveland twice. We played some tough teams, you lose those, whatever. They're good teams. But the teams we played this week were not good teams, and we went 1-3. You have to beat the bad teams. You have to steal one here and there from the good teams because every now and then you're going to lose to a bad team. If you want to be a playoff team, if you want to be a contender, you have to win the majority of the games against these teams that are hovering right around 500. If we want to be the team that the Bucks thought they could be going into the season, and even some of us, when we did our preseason predictions, I think I picked the lowest win total, but even I think I went 43 wins or 44. And that was the episode we had Patrick on, and we were all one. I think it was 43, 44, and 45 wins we predicted. But those numbers don't seem like they're reachable at this point in time with how we're playing. Certainly mathematically they're reachable, but the team is going to either have to figure some stuff out or it's not going to happen, and they need to figure it out quick. Reminds me of another Wisconsin sports team. We don't do a podcast about them, but
hey, RELAX, Chuck.
Yeah. So they if they figure some things out fast, the season is certainly not lost. But it certainly doesn't look good, and the advanced stats don't help their case.
Well, and you said they need to figure things out quick. To me, I wish I could see it happening, but to me it almost looks like they're on the downswing and that things are actually torpedoing rather than on the ascent. So, like you said, we're going to probably record another one of these in about a week. I guess we'll kind of see where we stand from that. But that being said, it's officially, as of today, as we record this, 214 days until the NBA draft, which to me it doesn't matter if the Bucks are picking 1st, 2nd, 5th, 17th. It's something I go crazy for. I love the draft. The NBA and NFL drafts are probably my 2 favorite sports days of the year. Given where right now we're kind of being projected, we're going to look at some of these prospects. Obviously, the number one consensus draft prospect this year is going to be Ben Simmons, who's the 6'10", small forward, power forward. I mean, he could probably play 2 guard. He could probably play some center. He could probably play some point guard. I mean, this kid does it all. He's Australian. So, I mean, he's Australian and left-handed. Do I even need to say more? How bad do you want this guy on your team?
Yeah, I mean, he looks like the real deal. Those of us in Milwaukee, LSU played Marquette a few weeks ago, so we got to see him on TV. He's on LSU, so they'll be on ESPN, SEC Network. If you've got cable, you're going to get a fair amount of his games anyways because he goes to a big school. But it was kind of nice to see him at Marquette, and actually Marquette pretty decently held him in check and actually won that game because Marquette in their own right has another potential lottery pick, which in Ellenson. So it was a battle of 2 lottery picks, and Marquette came out on top. So I've only seen that one game of Ben Simmons, and I've seen some highlights and such. But he certainly, unless he gets injured, he will almost definitely be the number 1 pick. Unless some. I can't imagine any scenario where he's not number 1 overall next year. I'll just, even if he got injured, I have to imagine. Unless he goes back to school for a second year, he should be the number 1 pick.
And if you don't know his measurables, he's about 6'10", between 230, 240 or so. I've seen him listed at. I don't know if he's necessarily that heavy. He looks a little bit thin to me, but he kind of has almost a Giannis-type body, very long, lanky, has big strides. Tremendous athlete. I've seen the comparisons everywhere from Lamar Odom to, a more polished Lamar Odom, or I've seen left-handed Tracy McGrady, but everything I've seen so far indicates that this kid is a generational type talent and maybe as good a prospect we've seen since Kevin Durant.
Yeah, so here I've got his measurables, since Jake was just kind of saying in there. They've got height with shoes, 6'10", weight 240, and this is from the LSU Combine this year. Wingspan of 7 feet and a quarter inch, so very long arms, and then a standing reach of 9 feet, half an inch, so can nearly touch a rim. It doesn't have to jump much to get up there. No step vertical jump of 37 inches and a max vertical jump of 41.5 inches. So it can almost jump 3.5, over 3.5 feet or about 3.5 feet off the ground. So yeah, it's pretty impressive measurables. But then in terms of what he's doing so far, and it's only 5 games into the season for them, but he's averaging 16 points and 15 boards. Yeah, 15 and a half boards, all while also getting 6 assists, 2 steals, 1.5 blocks, and only 1 turnover. Well, 1.2 turnovers. So, he's backing up his measurables with putting up crazy numbers, averaging 15 and 15. We'll call it 15 and 15, and early in the season he was averaging 20 and 20, but I think that was about 3 games into the season, so... but it seems likely that come season ending, he's probably going to average 15 and 15 with another 6 assists, that's really good numbers, for a freshman at in Division I.
Well, and he's clearly the jewel of this draft. I mean, the apple of every team's eye. And I had talked to about, if the Bucks were lucky enough to be in position to draft him, and he said, well, you already have Giannis, you already have Jabari. Those are, similar players now. What do you do with those guys? And I say, honestly, you figure that out later, because he probably is a bigger talent than either one of those 2 guys. And I love both of them. So, again, I would give up just about anything to get a Ben Simmons.
Yeah, and I think in any draft, and this is NBA, NFL, baseball, whatever, you have to pick the most talented player. You sort everything out after the fact. He's a young guy. Even if he comes in right away, he's probably not going to be a stud from day one. He'll probably be a really good player from day one as a rookie year. But you look at Kevin Durant; he was kind of a chucker his rookie year, and now he's he won.
And how did that work out?
He won an MVP a couple years ago. You're the real MVP.
Hint, Bucks.
So I think I'm with Jake there. If you're picking number 1 overall, and certainly we're a long way away from there, because I don't see any way we catch Philadelphia for the most amount of lottery balls in the machine. But
I think we have more wins now than Philly will have for the next 3 years.
we only have 6 wins. Let's not go overboard here.
A little bit hype.
Yeah.
Whatever.
We might have more wins than they get this season, but even that seems far-fetched. But yeah, you take the best player and then you let everything, fall where it is. I think when you're picking later, if you have 2 players ranked very closely and one's a better need, then maybe you give a slight factor to need. But when you're picking in the top 5, certainly, you just take whoever's the best. If you have a guy who has the exact same clone of that player, the same measurable, same player, they're going to do the exact same thing, I don't care. Just put them out there, and that's why the coaches are paid the big money to figure that out.
Looking at some more of these prospects, I think most places I've seen have Kentucky centers Scal Labissiere. That's how I'm going to say it, because I think it sounds cool.
It certainly looks French, with the way it's spelled. I don't know. I don't know much about his history in terms of if he is French or whatever. Let's see. Well, he's from Haiti. So, yeah, I believe Haiti is a former French territory.
Well,
so that very well could be. If it's been a while since I've done geography. So if I'm wrong, well, go fuck yourself.
There, see, I knew you had an F-bomb in you. But no, Scal, we'll just say Scal for now.
Yeah. It's kind of like Giannis.
Yeah,
it's
we'll
easier
go
to
with
call him
that
Giannis than to go with the last name. He might be a player that goes by first name once he's in the NBA.
Well, he's a 7-footer, a legit 7-foot-tall center, playing for Kentucky this year, another freshman. There's a lot of touch around the rim. I mean, he could also probably play some power forward in the NBA if need be. He's got a good mid-range game. I've seen some comparisons. A site I'm looking at says LaMarcus Aldridge is a good comparison for him. It's interesting with Kentucky players because they're so loaded every year that statistically in school maybe they don't show the most, but you get them to the next level and you start to see what kind of player they're going to become. So I think he could potentially be a fit for the Bucks. If he's anything close to a LaMarcus Aldridge, that's obviously a tremendous pick in the top 5. Looking at some of the other names here, a guy I really like is probably my number 2 guy would be Brandon Ingram, who's playing for Coach K at Duke. 6'10", small forward. He's got a very Kevin Durant type body. He's very light, but very, very good shooter from deep. And I think in this day and age in the NBA, he's going to be a great fit because he has that length to play defense, and he's already a good shooter at 18 years old. Playing for Coach K, I mean, that's just the icing on the cake. I mean, he's put out a lot of great players, including Corey Maggette.
Yeah. Well, former Buck great Corey Maggette, Goggle Me Slime.
That was
Steven Jackson. That's right. Yeah, Corey Maggette had his own host of problems, but yeah, I'm a fan of Brandon Ingram. If you made me pick second right now, he might be second. It might be Skal, just because 7-foot guys, they're always worth value. Especially 7-footers who have skill sets. I mean, we're talking, this year's draft, Karl Anthony Towns might be the best player coming out of the draft, and he didn't go did he go number 1? No, he did go. He did go number 1. Okay, I was trying to remember if Minnesota had the number 1 pick.
Lucky bastards.
Yeah. So you those 7-foot guys, they just have great value, especially when they've got good hands and they can play decent defense. So I would be okay. Ben Simmons to me is number 1 overall, and then after that, you could make the case for either one of them to me.
Yeah, there's still a lot of basketball to be played.
Yeah, these guys haven't even gotten into their conference games when they start to play against actual, they've played some early season tournaments where you get Ben Simmons up against Marquette, and they actually play a power conference school and not some mid-major. Mm-hmm. So yeah, once they get into conference play, we'll really start to see what these guys are made of. How they handle the competition increasing to a level, because at this point when you're a freshman, we're just looking at your measurables. We've seen you in high school, but in high school again, you're playing against far inferior talent, other than maybe on your AAU ball. So yeah, we really don't know that much about these guys, but it's hard for me to imagine Ben Simmons not going number 1, and then after that, I'd probably say Skal and Brandon Ingram are number 2 and 3, and I don't see that changing, but you just never know. And I guess we'll see how the season plays out, because if the Bucks keep playing like this is going to be a regular weekly feature talking about who's moving up and down the draft boards.
Sure. Another guy, I know a lot of people are off the Michael Carter-Williams bandwagon. If the Bucks are bad enough to have a top 5 pick, I'm sure point guard is going to be a concern for them. And if you want to know the top point guard in this draft, it's probably Jamal Murray. He's another freshman at Kentucky, playing on another loaded squad. 6'3", 6'4", plays more of a combo guard type game. If there was some Brandon Knight fans out there still lingering around, I think he's a kind of a similar player, dynamic scorer.
We met a couple Brandon Knight fans last week.
We did. That was quite an interesting argument. But he has very long arms, not really a true point guard. You look at some of the other guys that are kind of being mocked around the top 5. It's a Croatian power forward, Dragan Bender. Some comparisons already being made to Kristaps Porzingis. I don't think he's quite the athlete, but a 7-footer who can shoot jump shots. Again, a premium in this league. Domantas Sabonis, who is Arvydas Sabonis' kid. He's a 6'10" power forward from Gonzaga. A lot of people on the Real Jam boards, at least, like this Jacob Poltel from Utah, and I know he had considered coming out last year as a freshman. He's kind of got a more all-around game. He's a good defensive player, good rebounder, but I think he's going to be a guy that doesn't necessarily have to get a ton of usage to get the most out of him. And there's Henry Ellenson, the freshman at Marquette. I've seen some comparisons to Kevin Love. He's a mobile big that can shoot. Another potential top 10 pick. Diamond Stone, I know, who's kind of public enemy number one here. If you're a Badger fan, he initially was kind of being mocked in the top 10. I think more and more people are thinking he's going to stay longer, but he's another name that could possibly come out. But as you said, as the season goes on and we kind of see where the Bucks are relative to the rest of the league as far as draft stock goes, we'll take a look at more of these prospects. But if you want to maybe have some more hope for this year, start looking at him, particularly Simmons, because the thought of adding him to a young core, it's a tremendous thought. And go ahead, June.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, going into the season, Giannis and Jabari, and I think almost everyone would agree that they are number 1A, 1B, however you want to rank them. Obviously, coming off the injury, Giannis is number 1 on the team, and he should be the core piece to build around. Jabari, he's a former number 2 pick coming off an injury. There's no way, he's another piece you build around. And we wanted a third piece because that seems to be the formula. You need at least 3 guys to win a championship, and that's the goal here. We want to bring a trophy back to Milwaukee. It's been before my lifetime, before Jake's lifetime, because I've got a few years on him. So we've not seen a championship in our lifetime from the Bucks. We've been fortunate enough to see some in other sports, but so that's the goal. And going into the season, my hope was, hey, Michael Carter-Williams with an off season, Greg Monroe, the big free agent. Maybe that's enough, along with a Middleton and then decent bench players. It doesn't. The way they're playing right now, it doesn't look to be enough. So last week when we recorded, I said kind of tongue in cheek, hey, let's maybe we'll get another person, another piece or whatever, and we'll start tanking. This week it's more realistic, and I guess we'll see where things go in the next week or two. It's going to be, last week we said it's a big week for telling where the team is at, but certainly it's that way again. We're right back where we were a week ago. We're not bad enough to jump on the tank full on yet.
I am.
Yeah, you are. You're ready to jump on the tank always, but. And I agree, we are playing bad enough, but the talent is there. And my biggest fear, not that I don't want to get a top pick, because adding a Ben Simmons or whoever it ends up being would be fantastic, and it'd be such an exciting time to have 3 young studs or potential studs on the team. But my biggest fear is that we will be mediocre and get the 8th seed or just miss the playoffs and be the 9th or 10th seed, just missing the playoffs, and end up with the 12th overall pick or the 13th overall pick, wherever it is, somewhere just outside of the top 10, because you're not always going to be lucky and get a Giannis at that point in the draft. So we need to increase our odds. If we're going to right this ship and we're going to start playing like a good team and we're going to go on a run. Otherwise, it's all hands on board. Let's fire up the tank and see what we can do next year.
Well, and before we go, I did want to throw one more name that I wanted to float out there. Was 7'2" Chinese center Zhu Qi, or Zhao Qi. I don't know how it's pronounced, but he's 19 years old, which, who knows? It's China, so maybe he's really 29, 39 years old, but 7'2", great rim defender, can handle the ball a little bit, can shoot the ball a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised if he sneaks into the top 10, maybe even top 5, just based on the measurables and that.
Yeah, 7'2", that's going to increase his draft stock no matter what he does in international ball, and I don't know what he's... According to Draft Express, he's playing for Xingcheng. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. Right there.
Xingcheng.
Yeah, whatever that team is. He's playing for some team over in China. So, yeah, he's certainly someone to keep your eyes on.
Maybe he's the next E.
Yeah. I would hope he's more like Yao Ming than E.
Instead of E, we're getting Key.
Yeah. So that. Yeah, I mean, as long as he can defend a chair, whatever.
I think we should bring him back and then do the E-Key connection.
So there's definitely some names to watch on. As the Bucks season progresses and we kind of get a better feel for where the team is going, because we're just under a quarter of the way through the season, so we have an idea of where we're playing, and right now it's not good. But as it goes on, that'll be more and more set in stone, and then we'll know more likely what range we're picking in, and we'll also see these kids in college and international ball, and we'll kind of we will definitely, no matter how the Bucks do, we'll talk about that, because Jake, as he says, loves the draft. We both watch a fair amount of college ball and like watching these guys. So it's definitely something we'll talk about. Even if the Bucks go on a hot streak here and they end up taking the number 2 seed overall, we'll still be talking draft some, but it may become a bigger focus, unfortunately, as we go forward.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Buck Life Podcast. As always, we thank you very much, and in about a week or so, we'll probably be recording another one. Until next time, for Chuck, I'm Jake. Thanks for joining us again. Do you hear it? It's the tank. It's warming up, baby.
I was wondering where he was going with this sound effect. It was a tank sound effect. I have no idea how that'll come out. We'll see when I edit this how that sounds. It might be terrible.
Maybe I'll have you throw in some tank sound effects. So either way, we'll see you next time. E-Key Connection.